All right, what is up, guys? Here to break down Saturday's second main slate of the EPL season. We had a fun first week, covered all the slates. The Friday showdown, Brentford Arsenal, and then the Saturday morning showdown, and then the 5-game main slate, which was very fun having all games start at once. I'm going to give everybody a couple minutes to get in here. See if we have any live. I know there's still quite a bit of time to go back and watch this video. So that's kind of the plan going forward, is to have these videos out on Thursday evening. So you have all day Friday, all Saturday morning just before lock, if that's when you want to watch it. But we want to have these out on Thursday night so you have time to digest, have time to have a grip on the slate kind of before lineups come out, so you know what to do as lineups come out, some things to look for and things like that. If you haven't joined us over at Patreon, be sure to do so. I dropped the link in the chat, patreon.com/JagerBombs. A lot of good stuff coming up, obviously covering all the soccer slate through EPL this weekend, and then trying to do as many as we can of the other ones that they've been posting. They've been doing the Championship, which is the league right below EPL in England, and a lot of the other European leagues we've been really trying to cover, whether it's Showdown or main slates or classic slates, so trying to get as much of that added as we possibly can. To go along with that, we got college football starting up next Saturday, I believe. Will be the first slate. Not all teams are starting then. I think the first main slate is going to be on 2 weekends from this weekend for college football. But as I mentioned last week, it's really big that we have all these soccer games starting at once because we're not having to compete and go through college football lock to look at some of these games and the lineups coming out. That was, like I said, was crazy last year, trying to juggle everything with the news coming out with college football, as well as that middle EPL game that started at like 12:30 in the day, which is right at college football lock. So one thing I want to do before I jump into this week's slate, and if you haven't already watched last week's video, I did put timestamps on there. So go back and watch that because I did break down some of the transfers through the offseason, just kind of looking at each team and the transfers that came in or went out. So that's good as we're still early in the season to get a handle on some of these teams and the new look to them. But one thing that I wanted to do before we hopped into this week's slate was just kind of do a review of the lineup that I landed on last week. So last week I played in the 44. This was the $44 GPP. I try to stay in something like that most of the time if I'm playing GPP, and that's because there's limited amount of entries that people can have. Obviously, single entry is better. I think there's a $50 single entry. But this is where I was at last week, and I just kind of wanted to talk through some of the process of how I got to these plays. And I did quite a bit of this in my rankings on the sheet after lineups came out on Saturday morning, and talked about a lot of it in the chat as well. But kind of the core that I was able to build around was Mason Mount, James Ward-Prowse, and Lucas Dean. Marcus Alonso would have been the third core there. And those Chelsea pieces, if you remember, Chelsea was the biggest favorite on the slate last week. And I was really going to be on Reece James, be on Ben Chilwell. I thought they had a nice opportunity to have sets over Mason Mount, but neither started. And once I seen that, it was trying to figure out who was going to take set pieces, and I landed on Alonso, who had taken some in the past, and then obviously Mason Mount. I thought he would have a share somewhat. So those were the two main pieces from Chelsea that I went with. James Ward-Prowse when I did the video last week, was not expected to be in. But once he had a monopoly of set pieces, and I didn't think it was a horrible matchup with Everton either. They ended up losing 3-1, but if you look at his stat line, 11 crosses, just kind of did a little bit of everything for them. And then forward was very tough. Forward was something that we looked at last week, and even when lineups came out, I think we were all struggling a little bit with that. Pascal Gross was underpriced for what we are used to seeing, so he was definitely my first option there. He got the assist on one of those Brighton goals, 9 crosses. Was able to do quite a bit for us there with 17 DK. And then Richarlison, he was kind of the second piece. I thought he's coming in good form from the summer with the national team, and I really thought he would be able to carry that over, and he did with a goal and an assist, 23 DK. So that really paid off for me there. But Lucas Dean, once James Rodriguez was out for Everton, I went to him as having a monopoly of set pieces, and he was very popular as that other defender spot. Didn't do a ton, had quite a few crosses, couple shots, almost 10 DK. We'll take that for sure. So that's kind of where I was at up at the top. Once you get down to the bottom, Nick Pope, really it just became the filler plays that made all the rest fit. Nick Pope, I thought, had a good chance in a game that I thought was a toss-up at the before the slate. 2-1, they lost. He gave up 2 goals, got 4 saves. Okay, but he was a cheap goalie. And then Etebo for Watford just kind of made everything fit. Not many people played in there. He was 3K. Wasn't one that I was expecting any more than those 4 DK. Honestly, going in, if he got a little bit more, then yeah, he would have paid off for sure. Yeah, Travis, sounds good. I know we got a little bit of time to go back and rewatch, like I said. So, yeah, good luck this week. We'll talk to you in the chat for sure. But that's kind of where I ended up and how I came on that lineup. It was able to get in and cash in that contest this week. So just wanted to kind of touch on that before we hopped into this week's sheet. So one thing that I'm going to talk about first on this week's sheet is it's kind of a tough spot in the season for me to know what to do as far as what stats we want to look at. And honestly, what it comes down to for me is, yes, I want to look at last season's stats, which I can do, and I can drop a link on the stat website that we use to go back and do so. But I wanted to go ahead and pop in, even though you're going to have a very small sample, 1 game in this season, I wanted to go ahead and pop in those stats in the sheet because I don't want to get behind and have a situation that these roles are changed on this team from last year, and we're still going off last season's stats. It really comes down to I want to be ahead of the game rather than behind. And I think seeing some of the roles that each guy's played last week will really help us in that. So for the next few weeks, really, the projections are going to be going off of a very small sample size. I know that's not the greatest thing there, so don't let it be an end-all, be-all, but it will help just kind of to get a ranking and see what people's role is with these new teams or just kind of this reshuffling. Like Aston Villa has a lot of new faces, and this looking at last week will really help us in where we should target this week. If you have any questions as I'm going through here, be sure to drop them in the chat. Be happy to answer those. I'll pop back in from time to time to answer those. And I'm going to go game by game here, and I'm going to give at the end. We're going to talk about building a little bit, and just kind of go through how I'm initially building teams for Saturday. Just some of the core plays that I'm looking at, and how I'm landing. So let's hop into the first game. It's going to be Aston Villa and Newcastle. Newcastle was in one of those shootout games, 4-2 last week in the loss. Aston Villa looked like they were getting dominated. I have some dogs up at my window. Okay. But Aston Villa was getting dominated by Watford, and then in the second half, they kind of Leon Bailey subbed on. They looked a little bit better in that second half, and now they're in a situation as a minus 120 favorite, 2.75 total. That I'm going to be targeting them, especially for GPPs. Once we kind of go through every game on this slate, you're going to notice a lot of the ownership, a lot of the priority is going to go to Manchester City. And that's not wrong. That's not, but that does open up a lot of GPP pivots. And this is one of the teams, Aston Villa, I think, is going to be a very interesting team for me all year. I mentioned them last week that I wanted to be ahead on this team, but I didn't feel that last week was a great spot for them. But this week, I think is. I think Leon Bailey and Emiliano Buendia will start together. They should split set pieces. This has Ollie Watkins as the second forward with Danny Ings. That could be Anwar El Ghazi. But either one of those, I think they're in a good spot to either one to get a goal this week. So Leon Bailey and Emiliano Buendia, I think you could play them in cash, either one. But they're better GPP plays too if you're prioritizing a bunch of city pieces. And then Danny Ings I like as well. The fullbacks Matt Cash and Matt Target, we both know them from last year as being pretty good DFS players as far as being able to cross and getting involved a little bit in the attacking side. So I think both of those are decent plays. Or kind of not ones that I'm going to go, well, yeah, they're going to be the first ones in my lineup. But I think you can definitely prioritize Aston Villa as your secondary team, especially in a cash lineup or your primary team in GPP. On the other side, Matt Ritchie took most of the set pieces last week. John Joe Shelby did get one corner. But Matt Ritchie looked pretty good. He's 6,300. They moved him to defender eligible here, so you could go there. It's not really a place that I'm looking to go. I think Aston Villa controls possession. Don't see a ton for Newcastle here. So really that would be the only option that I would look at going with. You could play one of these attackers in GPPs if you thought they were going to score. But probably not where I'm going on this slate with 4 games. Second game here, you got Brentford, who was kind of is going to be the darling team, I think, early in the season. It looked like last week against Arsenal that they were very ready for that game. I mean, coming out at home, newly promoted, that was the theme last week. And now they're plus $190 to Crystal Palace, plus 160. This is not an overly exciting game. I think it's the lowest total. Yeah. Lowest total on the slate at 2.25. Really just a couple pieces here. I don't know. I feel that Brentford could have a letdown spot after getting a big win to start out their campaign, but Crystal Palace needs a bounce back after losing 3-0 to Chelsea. I mean, that was a tough opener for them. What we saw last week was Gyro Reedwald was taking set pieces for them. And he's 3K. So if you could go there for sure in the midfield. Will Zaha is a GPP option if you want to go there at 6,800. Benteke looked pretty good near the end of last year. Not sure I'm going to go there. Really not an overly exciting side either. And then for Brentford, we saw Sergi Canos take set pieces for them. He did score a goal last week as well. He's 7,000 at defender. I think that's a little too high. Mbeumo could also take set pieces. It didn't look like he did last week, but will get involved. He's 5,900. You could go there if you want. I think Canosa's GPP. I don't have him highlighted. And then Ivan Toney is a GPP option too. He led them in scoring last year in the championship, so I think you can go there for GPP. But really, that game is not overly exciting to me, so not one that I'm going to be prioritizing when I'm first building my lineup. If I fall on one of these guys, sure. And my favorite in the game would be Reedwald, as long as he's on set pieces. And there's a couple guys that we got to watch to make sure he is on set pieces. Let me take a look at, just kind of show you. So Crystal Palace, we're looking for Eze. He would take sets if he is on. And then Luka Milicevic could also take sets. So if both of those are not in, like is still projected, I think Reedwald is a good play, and he could get a little popular, especially in cash games at that price. Moving on, this is an interesting one for sure. I think the Everton Leeds game is one that we see both teams score. I think this could be the potential shootout game of the slate if you want to go a game stack and think you see one of these 4-2 games or 3-2 or whatever it may be. I don't think we see that high scoring, but if there is a game that you could see it go back and forth, I think this would be the one. We saw Leeds give up 5 last week to Man U. I don't think they do that. And I actually like the Leeds side here. Rafinha would be my top overall play in the game. 8,600. He's right up there with Lucas Dean. But Rafinha on the Leeds side is definitely my favorite. Other than that, Jack Harrison has always been a very good drafting play at 7,000. And then Patrick Bamford at sub 6K, I think, is a very good option if you're stacking up leads. Calvin Phillips, 3,400, should get the start. He didn't play last week, but I think he should get the start. Like I said before with him, and it looked the same way in England in the Euros this past summer. He's not an overly exciting guy, but he is a key piece for them and can do quite a bit. He could take some set pieces from Rafinha. Not expected, but he could, and he's only 3,400. Luke Eiling scored last week. I think you can go back to him at 4,900. I think that's a fine price as well. Those would be my favorites for them. Stuart Dallas as well. I'll highlight him as a GPP play. I think you can go there. He's 5,700 in the midfield. Not my favorite by any means, but if you're stacking up leads, you can definitely do it. On the other side, there's a few interesting options. Lucas Dean, like I mentioned, is going to take most all the set pieces. Anders Townsend did take, looks like, one corner last week and had an assist. Without James Rodriguez, I think Anders Townsend will have a little bit of a role on set pieces, but Lucas Dean should still have the majority. So he is the top play for me at 6,100 for Everton. And then Richarlison, I'm just going to keep riding this guy with the form that he's in, goal and assist last week. You can definitely go there. Dominic Calvert-Lewin scored last week, 5 shots. Very active there for him. I think you can go there in GPPs. And then Andrews Townsend is also a GPP option as well. Damari Gray is cheap if you wanted to go there. He would be kind of 5th in the pecking order for me for Everton, I think. But like I said, this is an interesting GPP game. You could play Rafinha in cash. Lucas Dean, you can definitely play in cash at defender. But I think they're a little bit more of just overall game, a little bit more of a GPP option. You're kind of going to see that as we get to this next game. Norwich and Man City. Norwich did not look very good last week. They were the one promoted team that lost last week, I think. And now they get Manchester City. Not a very fun start with Liverpool and Man City for them, but that's what we get. And now we're going to probably need to load up on Manchester City coming off the loss, surprising loss to me, to Tottenham. Son was able to score that one goal against City and take the win from them. They're almost minus 1,000 favorites, as you can see, um, in a 3.5 total. So we got to have pieces for sure. Kevin De Bruyne is expected to start here. 10-5, I think you got to play him. He kind of makes Man City go, to be honest. Without him starting last week, as you could see, they struggled. And then other than that, it's really Riyad Mahrez. It would be this number 2 option, and then one of Sterling or Torres. If this is the starting lineup, you could see Gabriel Jesus in place of Ferran Torres, who has been struggling a bit lately. Those would be my next favorites. Jack Grealish is a little overpriced for me with Kevin De Bruyne back. If Kevin De Bruyne is not starting, I think you play Jack Grealish. But with Kevin De Bruyne in, I think it's going to be a spot that I shy away from Jack Grealish a little bit. I don't think we've seen them together starting yet. Yeah, because Kevin De Bruyne didn't play against Leicester. Um, so, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they mesh together. I think De Bruyne is definitely the priority there for me. And then the fullbacks, Benjamin Mendy at 5,200 is a great play. One of the top defender plays on the slate, and João Cancelo would be the more of a GPP option there for me at 6,800. And then Norwich I won't be touching. So that's where I'm at on the slate. Gonna show something that I didn't do last week and didn't have last week at this time, but I went through and did a preliminary ranking. So if you stayed on the video this long, I'm going to give you a kind of a glimpse of the top targets tab on the sheet. And that's kind of, I'll have this updated after lineups come out on Saturday morning because things will definitely change a little bit. But this is kind of a place that I get all my thoughts out there. So you can kind of see how I'm prioritizing certain plays at certain positions. And I've not got the format in here yet, as you can see in this column. And that really just means would I play them in any format, cash or GPP, or are they a value play? So, for example, at forward, I'll go ahead and do it here. Mahrez would be any. Sterling is any. Leon Bailey is going to be any for me. Ferran Torres, with that matchup, has to be any. And then Bamford and Danny Ings are GPP. And like I said, Ferran Torres struggling a little bit and could not be the starter there. In the midfield, then I have Kevin De Bruyne, obviously any format. Buendia any format. Rafinha is any format. Jairo Reedwald is a value play, and Jack Harrison for GPPs. And then at defender, you got Lucas Dean is any format, Benjamin Mendy any. Really, all these are any except João Cancelo, who would be GPP only. So I've not played with builds at all. So I'm going to go ahead and try to play with some of those real quick with you all on here, just to kind of see what we're looking at for the week. Let me share my screen there. Okay. All right. So what we're looking at here is, like I said, we're going to have to prioritize Manchester City. It's really going to be Kevin De Bruyne, and then it's going to be Riyad Mahrez. Like I said, if then kind of what I do is I go back to the rankings. I go through, spit all this out on the one page, and then I go back and I reference it. So from there, it's do you want a third city piece or do you want to go to one of these secondary GPP stacks? And I think the way I lean right now is probably going to need a Man City for cash. I think you play that third Man City attacking piece. But for GPPs, and let's go through both builds. So I think both of those, Mahrez and De Bruyne, are definitely core building blocks. And then Ben Mendy, I think, is the third Man City piece that I would build around. For the next spot for cash games, it's kind of tough because do you want one of those Aston Villa, or do you want that other Man City piece? So if you throw, say, Raheem Sterling in there, you can play him at forward or midfield. Then you got 4,400 left. Goalkeeper, usually what I do is throw in the cheapest one and then kind of come back and upgrade if I can. Here, this week, we're getting a major discount because of how big of a dogs Norwich is. 3,600 for Tim Krul. If he could just get us like 5 saves and give up 3 goals, we'd be dancing at 3,600 for a positive score. So I think you can go that route if you want to jam in a lot of pieces. And the reason I say you can do that is otherwise, I don't see any other spots that I really want to pay down for because I like Aston Villa. I don't really want to play Woodman. I like Leeds, so I'm not enthused to play Pickford. I suppose you can play one of these in the Crystal Palace Brentford game, either Raya or Giata. They're kind of in that mid range. But if I'm paying up, it's definitely going to be either Ederson or Emiliano Martinez. I'm not playing Leeds goalie Meslier because I think they give up at least 1, maybe 2. So if you're paying up, it gets kind of tough at this price point. And that's where I think Gyro Riedwald is going to come in as a pretty popular option in cash games. I think Lucas Dean is going to be popular there. So if you throw that in there, and then you got that here, so you can either pay up for Emiliano Martinez, and you got 3,300, and you're left in the range of, like I said, I've not played with any builds, so I don't even know where I'm ending up here. You could punt one of the City full center backs. It's not not a lovely spot to be in. That's for sure. But if you play Tim Krul, you have 5,200. I know it does not look good. It's not fun. It doesn't look fun. But you can get then Matt Cash. You can get Luke Eiling. You can get your 100 off Zinchenko. He's probably not starting. Damari Gray, GPP, if you really wanted to. Target. Yeah, so you have a lot of options that would probably be a third defender in that situation. That's kind of why I like Tim Krul. And Tim Krul makes even more sense, honestly, if you're not playing that third attacking piece for Man City in GPPs. If you're kind of going with the floor plays for Man City and hoping they score like 2, then you probably do want Tim Krul. I guess the problem with Tim Krul is they could give up 5 and have not enough saves to help you. That's the downside of it. But he's 3,600, lets you get anything that you want. So then say you play those and you want one of those Leon Bailey, let's say. Leon Bailey, then you got 37. Man, it just keeps me in Gyro Riedwald. I really don't want to have to rely on Riedwald too much. You could play Calvin Phillips, I suppose. But Riedwald makes sense. I mean, he's going to take set pieces as long as the lineup is right. If Kyle Walker was in, you could go there. Let's see. If you only have 4,000, click, I guess. Ruben Diaz. Yeah, there's some interesting options for sure. maybe we can find a value defender to go to, but I don't see any right off that I'm enthused to play at the um, lower price defenders. None of the Norwich guys I want to go to. Um, and the Crystal Palace ones are not great. Tyrick Mitchell is 3,700. Joel Ward's 35, but they're not fun to play by any means. Um, yeah, I don't see any value defenders that I'm in love with. If it fits, though, you can definitely do it. So if there's not any questions, I'm going to go ahead and hop off here. Be sure to hit me up in the Discord if you have any questions. Try to answer those leading up to lock. Like I said, we're going to have the rankings updated on Saturday morning right after the lineups are released. I'll go through and update those rankings on the sheet. But let's have another good week. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Be sure to give us a like and a subscribe if you haven't already. It's much appreciated. And we're looking forward to having a great year. I have a sheet up already for the early morning showdown on Saturday, so we'll be covering that. And then I think there's an afternoon showdown as well. There's got to be. Let me see. Let me see who that is too. I didn't see a slate. It's Brighton and Watford at 12:30, right after the main slate, and it's Liverpool and Burnley in the morning at 7:30. That's always a fun one to wake up for at about 6:45. Or if you're on the West Coast, and we do have at least one in the chat that's a West Coaster that wakes up at about 4:30, or no, probably 4 to check lineups and everything. So. I'm sure we'll have fun on Saturday morning. Tomorrow, there's an interleague slate that I'm going to be covering. I've got to get a sheet up for that. I'm actually not sure. I think I saw it's 3 games. I'm not 100% who they put on that because there's League One, which I'm sure is on there with PSG. There's a Bundesliga game, a La Liga, and a England championship game. Let me take a look at that while I'm on here. But I will have a sheet up for that. It starts at 2:45 tomorrow, so it's the English championship game with Swansea City and Bristol City, and then it's the PSG, Paris Saint Germain, and Brest. I mean, I'm going to assume that PSG is like minus 1,000 favorites or more, kind of like Man City at 3. And then they put the La Liga game, Real Betis and Cadiz on there as well. So I'll have a sheet up for that. We'll try to hop in there and have a good Friday before we hop into Saturday EPL. So like I said, hit me up with any questions. Good luck to everybody this week.